The sun dipped low over the plains, painting the horizon in a haze of fire and blood. The outlaws sat in silence around a dwindling campfire, each man lost in his own regrets and ambitions. Their leader, Caleb "Ironhand" McGraw, stared at the glowing embers like they were the dying remains of their past lives. Once, they had ridden with pride, feared and respected across the territory. Now, the law had branded them as nothing more than hunted animals. Caleb's weathered hand brushed over the revolver on his hip. He knew it wasn't just a weapon anymore, it was the key to their survival. The crack of distant gunfire jolted the camp. One of the younger riders, Jesse Pike, leapt to his feet, revolver drawn. But the sound faded into the night. A reminder. The law was close, and the frontier had no safe havens left. Caleb finally spoke, his voice low and gravelly. "We got one chance. South. Across the border. Freedom or the grave." The men exchanged uneasy glances, knowing that the ride would be their last gamble. The chapter of running was closing. What lay ahead was blood. As they doused the fire, the faint outline of riders appeared on the ridge, silhouetted against the moonlight, moving steadily toward them. The hunt had already begun. The posse on their trail was no ragtag band of farmers. These were hardened bounty hunters, led by Sheriff Amos Dunning, a man whose reputation was built on never letting quarry escape his noose. He rode a coal-black stallion, his wide-brimmed hat casting shadows over cold eyes. Each outlaw in Caleb's band carried a price on their head, and Dunning wanted every last one swinging from a rope. The outlaws pushed their horses hard, galloping across dry riverbeds and through jagged canyons. Dust rose behind them, a trail impossible to hide. Caleb's second-in-command, Sarah Whitlock, the only woman among them, rode beside him. She had once been a saloon girl with a quick smile, but tragedy had sharpened her into steel. Her rifle was slung across her back, her eyes scanning the horizon for ambush. "They'll drive us into the desert," she muttered. Caleb nodded grimly. "Then we ride through hell and come out clean." As the moon climbed high, Jesse Pike, riding at the rear, suddenly cried out. A gunshot echoed through the canyon. Blood sprayed across the rocks. The lawmen had caught up. Chaos erupted. The outlaws wheeled their horses around, guns flashing in the silver light. Bullets sparked off stone walls, ricocheting into the night. Jesse fell from his horse, clutching his side as the rest of the gang fired back. The canyon became a killing ground, smoke and fire dancing in the narrow gorge. Caleb's revolver barked with deadly precision, dropping a bounty hunter from his saddle. Sarah's rifle cracked, sending another sprawling in the dust. But the posse kept coming, relentless. Caleb dragged Jesse back onto his horse and barked at the gang to retreat. "Ride!" he shouted, the word tearing from his throat like thunder. They broke free of the canyon, their horses lathered with sweat, Jesse moaning in agony. Caleb looked back at the shadowed gorge, now lit by the flicker of gunfire. The law had tasted their blood, and would not let go. As they cleared the canyon, Jesse went limp in Caleb's arms. His eyes fluttered shut, and his final breath whispered into the desert wind. The outlaws buried Jesse beneath a lone mesquite tree, marking his grave with a pile of stones. The air was thick with grief, but also with fear. Every death reminded them of the price they might all pay before crossing into freedom. Sarah knelt by the grave, her face stone, but her hand trembled as she touched the dirt. Caleb placed a calloused hand on her shoulder. "He rode with us. He deserves to be remembered." Her eyes flicked up to his, fierce and wet. "Then we make it worth something." They pressed on, the desert stretching before them like an endless, unforgiving ocean of sand and stone. Supplies were scarce, and waterskins ran dry quicker than they hoped. The sun blazed mercilessly overhead, baking the ground beneath their horses' hooves. Caleb could see the doubt in his men's faces. Freedom seemed further away with every mile. Yet he knew turning back wasn't an option. The law would follow them until the last man fell. At dusk, as they stumbled into a dried-up riverbed, a figure stepped out from the shadows with a shotgun leveled at their chests. The man who blocked their path was grizzled, with a scar cutting across his cheek and eyes like ice. He introduced himself as Luther Kane, a former outlaw turned rancher. "You're riding to your deaths," he growled, keeping his shotgun steady. Caleb raised his hands, calm but tense. "Maybe. Or maybe we're riding toward freedom. Luther's lips curled into a bitter smile. Freedom don't come cheap. He glanced at Jesse's grave mark on Caleb's sleeve. Already paid part of the price, haven't you? After a tense standoff, Luther lowered his shotgun and offered a deal. He knew a hidden trail south, a smuggler's path that could lead them past the lawmen. But he demanded payment, gold, horses, and a promise. Sarah distrusted him instantly, her rifle halfway raised. But Caleb saw the fire in Luther's eyes, a man who had once dreamed the same dream they did. Still, every bargain with strangers carried its own peril. Luther leaned close, his voice cold. I'll get you across. But when the shooting starts, and it will, you best decide who you're willing to leave behind. The fire crackled low as Luther Kane leaned back on a log, his scarred face flickering in the glow. The outlaws gathered around, listening to his plan. He spoke of an old trail, a smuggler's path that wound through a canyon where no lawman dared follow, a place riddled with caves and shadows. It'll get you south, Luther said, his eyes narrowing. But it ain't without danger. There are things in that canyon worse than lawmen. Sarah's voice cut through the firelight, sharp and distrustful. Why help us? Men like you don't do charity. Luther smirked. Because I've ridden where you are now, and I know what it feels like to want out. He leaned forward, voice lowering. Besides, maybe I just want to see if any fool is stubborn enough to try. Caleb studied him, torn between suspicion and hope. Every outlaw there knew the truth. Without Luther, their trail south might already be closed. As the fire dimmed, Sarah caught Luther staring at her rifle, not with fear, but with hunger. He wanted something more than gold. At dawn, the gang followed Luther into the canyon. The walls rose high on either side, jagged cliffs that cut off the sky. The trail was narrow, littered with rocks and bones of animals that had wandered too far. Every step echoed like a drumbeat of doom. Caleb rode at the front, revolver loose at his side. His instincts screamed that they were walking into a trap, yet turning back meant certain death at the hands of Dunning's posse. The deeper they went, the stranger it became. Cavern mouths yawned from the cliff faces, dark and empty, like watching eyes. Vultures circled overhead. The horses grew skittish, ears pinned back, their snorts betraying unease. Luther led with confidence, but Sarah's glare never left his back. Feels like a graveyard, one outlaw muttered. Luther only grinned. It is. A sudden rumble shook the ground, rocks tumbled from the canyon walls. Caleb whipped his head up to see riders above, rifles raised. They weren't lawmen. They were bandits waiting in ambush. The canyon exploded with gunfire. Bandits poured down the cliffs like wolves, shouting and firing into the gang. Caleb's men scrambled for cover, returning fire in bursts of thunder. Horses screamed as bullets cut through the air. Sarah dove behind a boulder, her rifle cracking shots that dropped two attackers where they stood. Dust choked the canyon, turning the skirmish into chaos. Caleb fought like a man possessed, each shot finding its mark. But the bandits were many, and their numbers swelled with every shadow. Luther fought alongside them, his shotgun booming, but his eyes flicked often to Caleb's gang, as if measuring which side was worth saving. Caleb saw it, and rage flared. Were they led into this ambush? Was Luther their Judas? The bandit leader stepped forward, a giant of a man with a scarred jaw and a necklace of bullets. He grinned at Caleb. "McGraw, didn't think you'd ride into my graveyard. You're mine now." The bandit leader called himself Rafe Delgado, once an outlaw as feared as Caleb, now king of the canyon's thieves. His voice echoed through the gorge like a war drum. "Drop your irons," he growled, "or we'll paint these rocks red." The gang hesitated, weapons still smoking. Caleb's jaw clenched. They couldn't win a full fight, not with Jesse already buried and their numbers thin. Yet surrender meant chains, or worse. Sarah spat into the dust. Better to die standing than crawl at his feet. Caleb felt the weight of his choice pressing down like the canyon walls. The men looked to him, waiting for his call. Luther, shotgun still warm in his hands, leaned close and muttered, "Choose quick. Delgado don't bluff." Caleb's heart thundered. He remembered Jesse's grave, the promise he made. Freedom was worth blood, but how much more could they spill? Caleb raised his gun, ready to decide between surrender or slaughter. Before he could act, a rifle cracked from above. Delgado staggered back, blood spraying from his shoulder. Someone else had entered the fight. The shot came from a figure on the canyon ridge, a woman draped in black, her wide-brimmed hat casting shadows over piercing eyes. She reloaded with practiced grace, then fired again, dropping another bandit. Chaos erupted as Delgado's men scrambled under her withering fire. Caleb seized the moment, shouting for his gang to push forward. Gunfire lit the canyon like lightning in a storm. The mysterious woman descended the ridge with deadly precision, each shot forcing the bandits back. When she finally reached the gang, Caleb caught her eyes, and froze. Recognition struck like a bullet. Her name was Isabella Cross, a bounty hunter with a reputation as deadly as Dunning's posse. Once, long ago, she had ridden with Caleb. Now she stood between him and certain death. Isabella's gaze locked on Caleb, her pistol still smoking. "I didn't save you," she said coldly. "I came to collect what's mine." Caleb stared at Isabella, the past rushing back like a flood. Years ago, before he was an outlaw, they had shared nights under the stars and whispers of a future neither got to have. But the years had changed her. Her eyes, once warm, now burned cold with purpose. She was no longer a partner. She was a predator. The gang shifted uneasily. "Who the hell is she?" muttered Cole, his hands tightening on his pistols. Caleb raised a hand, though his own grip trembled. "She's trouble," he said, never looking away from her. Isabella smirked. "Still got that silver tongue. But words won't save you this time, Caleb." Delgado roared in fury, clutching his bleeding shoulder. "Kill them all!" The canyon erupted again, and Isabella had no choice but to fight beside the outlaws she swore to bring in. The battle raged through Devil's Gate. Gunfire ricocheted off the stone, bandits falling like rag dolls as both sides poured lead into the dust-filled air. Sarah fought with icy precision, cutting through Delgado's men as if possessed by vengeance itself. Caleb, firing from cover, caught glimpses of Isabella moving like a ghost, swift, merciless, each shot another death knell. But Delgado was no ordinary foe. Despite his wound, he charged forward, swinging a massive revolver with reckless fury. The sheer force of his advance pushed the gang backward, deeper into the canyon. Caleb knew they couldn't hold forever. Their ammo was running thin, and the bandits were too many. Just as Caleb raised his revolver for what he thought might be the last shot, the canyon walls shook again, this time not from gunfire, but from dynamite. Someone was blowing the cliffs apart. The explosion ripped through the canyon. Rocks crashed down, crushing bandits and sending horses screaming into the dust. The gang scrambled, choking on dirt, half blind. Sarah pulled Caleb behind a boulder just as a massive slab fell where he'd been standing seconds before. Delgado's men scattered, their attack broken. When the dust cleared, only a narrow path remained through the rubble, a path that led deeper into the canyon, darker and more twisted than before. Luther shouted, "This way," and spurred his horse forward. Caleb hesitated, looking at Isabella. Her pistol was raised, aimed straight at his chest. Isabella pulled the trigger, but instead of Caleb, the bullet slammed into a bandit sneaking up behind him. She lowered her gun with a smirk. "Don't flatter yourself. I still need you alive." They rode hard through the shattered canyon until night fell. Exhausted, the gang made camp near a dry creek bed. Tension hung thick as gun smoke. Some men muttered that Isabella should be killed before she turned on them. Sarah's glare silenced them, though her own distrust was plain. Caleb finally confronted Isabella. "You could have let Delgado finish us," he said. "Why didn't you?" She shrugged, tossing a log into the fire. "Because Delgado's not worth the price. You are. There's a bounty so high on your head, McGraw, I could retire 10 times over." Her smile faded. "But I didn't come for money. I came for answers." Caleb's stomach tightened. Answers about what? About who he used to be. Isabella leaned close, her voice a whisper meant only for Caleb. "Tell me the truth. Did you kill my brother?" The words struck harder than any bullet. Caleb froze, memories clawing at him. Years ago, during a botched robbery, a young man had been caught in the crossfire. Caleb never knew his name, But now, staring at Isabella's unblinking eyes, he realized who it must have been. "It wasn't supposed to happen," he said hoarsely. Isabella's face hardened. "So you admit it?" Her hand hovered over her holster, every muscle taut as a coiled snake. Sarah saw it and sprang to her feet, rifle raised. "You'll have to go through me first." The camp erupted in shouts, guns drawn, the fragile truce shattering like glass. Caleb knew if a shot was fired, they'd tear each other apart. Before anyone could move, a long, low horn sounded in the distance, the signal of lawmen on the hunt. Dunning's posse had found their trail. The mournful wail of the horn echoed through the canyon, bouncing off the jagged rock walls. Every outlaw froze, guns half-raised, waiting. Caleb cursed under his breath. Dunning's men were closer than he'd feared. The dry creek bed offered no cover, and their horses were worn thin. If they stayed, they'd be sitting ducks. "We ride now," Caleb barked. The gang scrambled, throwing saddles onto weary mounts. Isabella kept her pistol trained on him even as she mounted. "Don't think this conversation is over." Sarah spat into the dust. "Save your threats, bounty hunter. We've got bigger fish chasing us." Just as they spurred forward, the crack of a rifle split the night. One of the gang toppled from his horse, stone dead. The posse had already arrived. Gunfire blazed in the darkness. Muzzle flashes lit up the canyon walls as Dunning's men unleashed hell from the ridges. The outlaws urged their horses into a desperate sprint, bullets whizzing past like angry hornets. Caleb shouted orders, trying to steer them toward the narrow pass that would take them east. Sarah rode at his side, firing blind into the night, her face set in grim determination. Behind them, Isabella rode with a frightening calm, her shots measured and deadly. For a moment, Caleb almost forgot she wanted him dead. Then, another shot rang out, this one grazing Luther's arm. The gang was bleeding, and the posse was relentless. Ahead, at the mouth of the pass, a wall of riders appeared. Dunning's men had cut them off. The rising sun painted the desert in fire and gold as the two groups clashed head-on. Horses screamed, men bellowed, and the air filled with smoke and dust. Caleb drew his revolvers, unleashing lead as he broke through the first line. Sarah cut down another lawman with a clean shot, but the gang was vastly outnumbered. Amid the chaos, Caleb spotted Dunning himself, his wide-brimmed hat, his cold gray eyes fixed on the outlaw he wanted most. Their gazes locked across the smoke-filled battlefield. Dunning raised his rifle slowly, like a hangman preparing the noose. Caleb braced for the shot, but before Dunning could fire, Isabella's bullet knocked the rifle from his hands. She saved him, again. The fight dragged on, men falling on both sides, until the ground was littered with the bodies of horses and riders alike. The outlaws managed to break free of the ambush, riding hard across the flats, their shadows long against the desert floor. But the cost was high. They left 2 men dead and another bleeding badly from a gut wound. Caleb's mind spun. Every choice was narrowing. Dunning's men were too many, Delgado's gang still hunted them, and Isabella's vendetta grew sharper by the hour. Sarah rode up beside him, her face streaked with blood. "We can't outrun them forever, Caleb. Something's gotta give." Caleb stared out at the horizon, where the desert shimmered like a furnace. In the distance, a dust cloud rose, another force approaching. Caleb's stomach dropped. Were they allies, or another enemy closing in? As the dust cloud neared, the glint of a tattered flag came into view. It wasn't Delgado's men, nor Dunning's posse, it was something else. A ragged band of riders, armed but not uniformed, rode beneath a black banner marked with a burning star. Caleb's blood ran cold. "They ain't lawmen," Luther muttered. "They're mercs. Hired guns." Sarah gritted her teeth. Hired by who? Caleb already knew the answer. Only one man in the territory had the money and hate to throw mercenaries into this fight. Governor Harlan, the same man who swore to bury every outlaw west of the Mississippi. The mercenaries raised their rifles in unison, blocking the outlaws' path. For Caleb and his gang, there was nowhere left to run. The mercenaries closed in, their rifles leveled at the weary outlaws. Caleb raised his hand slowly, his Colt hanging loosely from his finger. "We don't want no fight." His voice cracked in the dry morning air. The leader of the mercs, a scar-faced brute named Cato, spat into the dust. Funny thing, Outlaw, fights already bought and paid for. The gang shifted uneasily, horses snorting and stamping, sensing the tension. Sarah's finger hovered near her trigger, while Isabella sat unervingly calm. Cato smiled wide, showing broken teeth. "Drop your irons, or I'll decorate this ground with your blood." Just as Caleb lowered his revolver, Isabella's voice cut through the silence. "I know who hired you, and you'll regret taking his gold." Cato sneered. "And who might that be, girl?" Isabella leaned forward in her saddle, her eyes cold as steel. "Governor Harlan. The same man who cheated you and left you to rot after the border raids." The mercs shifted uneasily, whispers breaking their wall of silence. Caleb blinked, surprised. Isabella wasn't bluffing. She knew their history, their grudges. Cato's face darkened, anger flickering like fire in his eyes. For a long moment, the guns wavered. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Then one merc growled, "Boss, what if she's right?" Before Cato could answer, a rifle cracked from the ridge. One merc fell dead. Delgado's gang had arrived. Chaos erupted in an instant. Bullets screamed from the ridges as Delgado's men poured fire into the mercenaries. The outlaws dove for cover, horses scattering in panic. Sarah dragged Luther behind a fallen log as Caleb returned fire, dust and splinters filling the air. Cato bellowed orders, his mercenaries splitting their fire between Delgado's ambushers and the desperate outlaws. Isabella crouched low, her revolver snapping with deadly precision. "This is your chance, Caleb. We cut through while they kill each other." Caleb's jaw tightened. He hated running, but she was right. If they stayed pinned, they'd be corpses before sundown. Caleb whistled for the gang to mount, but when he turned, he saw Delgado himself stepping out from the smoke, twin pistols gleaming. Delgado's grin was wolfish, his black hat casting a shadow across his scarred face. "Caleb," he called, his voice rising above the gunfire. "You got something that belongs to me. Hand it over, and maybe I'll let you crawl away." Caleb spat blood into the dust, gripping his Colt tighter. "All I got is lead, Delgado." Delgado's men roared with laughter, bullets tearing through the battlefield. Isabella's eyes flicked nervously between them. "He doesn't want you, Caleb. He wants me." Her words chilled him to the bone. Sarah cursed under her breath. "We're not giving him nothing." The gunfire surged again, tearing the silence into shreds. Delgado raised his pistol, aiming not at Caleb, but at Isabella. The shot rang out like thunder. Isabella flinched, but it wasn't Delgado who pulled the trigger. It was Cato, the mercenary leader, gunning Delgado down before he could fire. Delgado staggered back, blood soaking his shirt, rage burning in his eyes. The battlefield fell into stunned silence. Cato smirked, smoke curling from his barrel. "Change of plans," he barked. "We're done being Governor Harlan's dogs. Now we'll take the bounty and the prize." His eyes slid to Isabella. "You, girl. You're coming with us." Caleb's heart slammed in his chest. He stepped forward, his Colt aimed squarely at Cato. "I don't care whose side you're on," Caleb said, voice low and raw. "You touch her, and you're a dead man." Cato laughed, and pulled a hidden fuse cord. A crate of dynamite lit up behind him, seconds from tearing the battlefield apart. The hiss of the fuse was louder than the screams. Caleb's heart stopped as sparks ate their way toward the dynamite crate. "Scatter!" he roared, shoving Isabella behind cover. Sarah dove head first into a gulch, dragging Luther with her as bullets and curses tore through the air. Cato stood laughing like a madman, the fuse burning down between his boots. "A new dawn for all of us," he shouted. Caleb raised his Colt, but even if he killed Cato, the blast would still rip the battlefield apart. Dust, sweat, and gun smoke mingled into a choking haze as the seconds ticked away. Just as Caleb pulled the trigger, the fuse disappeared beneath a boot. Isabella had stamped it out, revolver aimed dead at Cato's heart. Cato froze as Isabella cocked her revolver. "This ends here," she hissed, her eyes burning with fury. "No more men using me as a prize." Caleb held his breath. Isabella had revealed a fire he hadn't seen before, something born of survival and rage. The mercenaries hesitated, their loyalty shaking under the weight of her words. "You've all been betrayed," Isabella said, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Governor Harlan sent you to die out here. But you still have a choice." The silence was electric, as if even the desert wind listened. Before anyone could move, Delgado, bleeding but alive, snarled from the dirt, his pistol aimed at Isabella's back. The crack of gunfire shattered the standoff. Delgado fired, but Caleb hurled himself into Isabella, the bullet grazing his arm instead of striking her down. Sarah's rifle thundered, punching Delgado back into the dust. This time, he stayed down. Cato roared in fury, turning his pistol toward Caleb. The mercenaries, confused and leaderless, splintered. Some fired on Caleb's gang, others on Cato himself. The desert became a slaughterhouse of dust and lead, the air thick with screams and smoke. Isabella crawled to Caleb's side, pressing her hand against his bleeding arm. "You fool," she whispered, her voice trembling. Amid the chaos, Luther staggered to his feet, only to find himself face to face with a bounty hunter who had been tracking them all along. The bounty hunter was a giant of a man, his face hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat, a shotgun resting easy in his grip. "Name's Briggs," he said calmly, almost polite. "Price on your heads is worth more than gold." Luther's knees buckled, his pistol shaking as he raised it. Briggs didn't flinch. Sarah appeared behind Luther, her rifle aimed steady. "Step back, stranger." Briggs chuckled, tilting his hat back to reveal cold gray eyes. "Lady, I've faced Comanche raids and Pinkerton traps. You think you scare me?" The tension was razor-thin, every heartbeat a drumbeat of death. Briggs pulled the second trigger on his shotgun, not at Luther, but at the dynamite crate still lying smoldering in the dirt. The world exploded. The crate went up in a wall of flame, blasting men, horses, and weapons skyward. Caleb felt himself hurled through the air, sand and fire clawing at his lungs. When he came to, the battlefield was an inferno, bodies strewn across the desert floor. Through the smoke, Briggs walked untouched, like a devil out of hell. His shotgun gleamed, his shadow long against the burning wreckage. "No more games," he growled. "Hand over the girl, or I burn what's left of this desert with you." Isabella clung to Caleb, her face pale but defiant. Caleb staggered upright, his Colt shaking in his bloodied hand. Caleb whispered to her, "If we die tonight, we take him with us." Then he raised his gun at Briggs. Briggs moved through the flames like a phantom, his boots crunching over shattered glass and charred timbers. Caleb steadied his revolver, but every muscle screamed from the blast. The bounty hunter smiled coldly. "You can't outrun me. You can't outgun me. But you can die quick if you hand her over." Sarah aimed her rifle, her hands trembling yet determined. "You'll have to walk through all of us first." Briggs tilted his head, almost amused. "That's the idea." The fire behind him made his shadow stretch across the sand like a vulture's wings, a promise of death hanging in the night air. Briggs cocked his shotgun, the sound echoing like thunder, and stepped toward them, each footfall a countdown to hell. Caleb fired first. The shot grazed Briggs's shoulder, but it didn't slow him down. The gang scattered into the burning wasteland, gunfire chasing them through the smoke. Horses screamed as they bolted free, panicked by the firestorm. Caleb grabbed Isabella's hand and pulled her toward the ridge, bullets kicking up sand at their heels. Behind them, Briggs's shotgun boomed again, throwing Luther to the ground in a spray of dirt. "Keep moving," Sarah yelled, firing into the haze to buy them seconds. The desert became a hellscape of fire and shadows, where every step might be their last. As they stumbled up the ridge, a lariat whipped around Caleb's chest, yanking him backward into the smoke. Caleb hit the dirt hard, the rope tightening like a serpent. Briggs reeled him in, eyes gleaming with triumph. "Got myself the leader," he growled. Caleb clawed for his revolver, but Briggs stomped his wrist, pinning him down. Pain exploded through his arm. Up above, Isabella screamed, reaching for him, but Sarah held her back. "You'll die too." The gang was torn between saving Caleb and escaping Briggs's relentless pursuit. Caleb met Isabella's eyes through the smoke and mouthed, "Run." She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. Briggs raised his shotgun to Caleb's chest, his finger tightening on the trigger. A single rifle crack split the night. Briggs staggered, his shotgun falling from his hands. Behind him, Luther, bleeding and barely standing, held his smoking revolver steady. "Ain't done yet," he gasped, before collapsing into the dirt. Caleb seized the moment, tackling Briggs with all the strength left in him. The two men rolled in the dust, fists and fury flying. Briggs was stronger, his blows hammering Caleb like sledgehammers. But Caleb fought like a man possessed, every strike fueled by rage, fear, and the desperate need to protect Isabella. Dust choked the air, the fire painting their brawl in an infernal glow. Briggs's hand closed around a hunting knife, the blade flashing as he raised it high over Caleb's chest. The knife came down. Caleb twisted, the blade slicing into his side instead of his heart. With a roar, he slammed his forehead into Briggs's face, breaking free. Blood ran down both men as they staggered to their feet, circling each other like wolves in a pit fight. "Why don't you stay dead?" Briggs snarled, spitting blood. Caleb wiped his mouth and raised his fists. "Because I've got something worth dying for." Behind him, Isabella screamed, "Caleb, look out!" But her voice was lost in the roar of the fire and the madness of their duel. Briggs lunged forward, driving both men off the ridge and into the darkness below. The world spun as Caleb and Briggs tumbled down the ridge, rocks slicing their skin as they crashed into the canyon below. Caleb landed hard, the impact driving the air from his lungs. Beside him, Briggs rose like some unkillable beast, knife still in hand, eyes burning with hatred. Above, Isabella's screams echoed down the walls. Sarah shouted for ropes, but the gang was too busy fending off bounty hunters pouring through the smoke. In the canyon, it was just Caleb and Briggs, two men locked in a fight to the death under the indifferent stars. Briggs drove Caleb against the canyon wall, the knife blade pressing closer to his throat. Caleb caught Briggs's wrist, their muscles straining in a battle of strength and will. The knife's edge nicked his skin, a bead of blood rolling down. With a surge of desperation, Caleb slammed his knee into Briggs's gut, wrenching the blade free. He slashed wildly, cutting Briggs across the cheek. Briggs howled, blood dripping down his scarred face, and charged again. The two men grappled in the dust, fists, teeth, and steel colliding. Caleb's vision blurred from blood loss, but a fire inside him refused to die. This wasn't just survival, it was vengeance, it was freedom, it was love. Above them, Sarah's rifle fired, but the bullet struck dangerously close to Caleb instead of Briggs. Caleb spun, eyes flashing upward. Sarah lowered her rifle, her expression unreadable in the firelight. "Sorry, Caleb," she called down. "But freedom ain't big enough for all of us." Shock tore through him. After everything, the running, the bleeding, the fighting, Sarah had chosen betrayal. Briggs laughed through his bloodied teeth. "Even your own don't want you." Caleb barely ducked in time as Briggs lunged again. He realized, too late, that survival wasn't only about the men chasing them, it was also about the knives hidden in supposed allies' hands. As Briggs pressed the attack, Sarah's second shot rang out, this time aimed square at Caleb's chest. Caleb braced for death, but instead, Briggs jerked violently, the bullet slamming through his side. Sarah lowered the rifle slowly, her voice hard as steel. "I wasn't aiming for you, Caleb. But I needed you to know who you can't trust." Confusion and rage battled inside him, but there was no time to argue. Briggs, even wounded, refused to fall. The bounty hunter staggered upright, blood soaking his coat. "Takes more than a bullet to stop me." His eyes burned with murder as he raised his knife again. Caleb gritted his teeth. "Then let's end this once and for all." Briggs let out a roar and charged one last time, knife flashing under the moonlight. The clash was savage. Caleb caught Briggs's arm mid-swing, twisting until bones cracked. The knife fell into the dust. Briggs swung his fists, each blow shaking Caleb to his core, but Caleb refused to fall. With a final surge, he drove Briggs backward, slamming him into the jagged rocks. Briggs staggered, spit and blood pouring from his mouth. "You can't kill me!" Caleb grabbed the fallen knife, his chest heaving. "I don't have to. The desert will." With a violent shove, he sent Briggs tumbling into the shadows of the canyon, his scream fading into the endless dark. Caleb collapsed to his knees, blood pouring from his side, while above, Sarah's cold eyes met Isabella's, promising another storm of betrayal yet to come. Caleb staggered back to the camp, his shirt soaked in blood. Isabella rushed to him, tears streaking her dirt-stained cheeks. "You can't keep bleeding like this," she whispered, holding him as if she could anchor his soul to the earth. But Sarah stood a few paces away, rifle in hand, her face unreadable. "Don't waste pity," she said coldly. "Men like him don't last." Caleb raised his eyes, meeting hers. "Then shoot me now, Sarah. But if you don't, remember I'll never forget what you tried to do tonight." The camp went silent, the fire crackling like a hanging rope tightening. Sarah lowered her rifle, but her faint smile promised the feud wasn't over. At dawn, dust clouds rose from the east, lawmen and cavalry, moving in formation, the desert trembling beneath their march. They had found them. Caleb, barely able to stand, barked orders as the gang readied for their last ride. "We head south. Across the border." Every outlaw knew the truth. This was their reckoning. No more running. No more hiding. The horizon held freedom, but only if they could carve their way through the army's tightening noose. Isabella gripped Caleb's hand. "If we fall together." He kissed her forehead, tasting both dust and salvation. The first cannon thundered, blasting rock and fire into their path. The desert exploded into chaos. Horses screamed as bullets tore the air. The outlaws rode like demons, firing into the storm of soldiers ahead. Caleb, weak but unyielding, led the charge. "Ride!" His voice cut through the roar of gunfire. Sarah was there too, her rifle cracking from horseback, her face carved in stone. For a moment, Caleb saw the woman she once was, loyal, fierce, his partner. But the glint in her eye reminded him, she would never ride for anyone but herself. The desert floor drank blood as bodies fell on both sides. A sharpshooter's bullet struck Caleb square in the shoulder, throwing him from his horse. Caleb hit the ground hard, vision flashing white. Soldiers closed in, but Isabella and the gang circled back, guns blazing to protect him. Sarah dismounted, kneeling beside him. "This is it, Caleb. You can't go on." He looked into her eyes, seeing the storm of betrayal and regret. "Was it worth it?" he rasped. "All your double-dealing, all your lies." Sarah's lips trembled just once before she hardened again. "Freedom's worth more than love, Caleb." She raised her rifle, not at him, but at the soldiers charging down. Her bullets dropped them like vultures. Caleb passed out. The last thing he saw was Sarah covering him with fire, her face unreadable. When Caleb awoke, the desert was silent. Bodies littered the sands, smoke curled to the sky, and the sun was bleeding into dusk. The survivors, so few of them left, stood at the border's edge. Isabella knelt at his side, tears falling onto his chest. "We made it," she whispered. "We're free." But Sarah was gone. No body. No farewell. Only her rifle left behind, leaning against a stone, as if mocking him. Caleb rose slowly, the weight of the dead heavy on his shoulders. Freedom had come, but it had cost them everything. The gang was broken, love scarred, and the desert had carved its price into their souls. Caleb looked south, toward the unknown. His voice was hoarse but steady. "Then let's ride. Whatever comes, we'll face it as the last of the free." The survivors rode into the burning horizon, while far behind, on the ridges of the desert, a lone figure watched. Sarah. Still alive. Still waiting.